So Personnel Advisory Council?
No report at this time. I will have an update on the new business in regards to FTEs for next year that I think the board, bring the board up to speed where we're at with the master schedule and staffing.
All right, Policy Advisory Council?
No meeting since the last discussion. We will meet before the June 12th board meeting. I know there was concerns about policy 890, and I believe a board member submitted some recommendations or things they want to discuss tonight, and I'll turn the floor over in regards to 890 to Mr. Welch.
Did everyone either get the email or the paper package? Did anyone not get the email?
I got both.
I got both.
I got both.
Did anyone really not have a chance to review any of it?
Got the email.
I didn't read all the IRS documents, but I read the language. in the draft
I read the
policy.
IRS documents as well. Interesting reading.
Basically, the last meeting we had, we went through policy 8:80 and 8:90. And it was sort of the first time we had those policies in front of us. And we went to a vote on both of them, and the 8:90 didn't pass. So I had gone back and gave you a little background here, how, you know, in my perspective, you know, we're the board, the leaders, and we should be guiding what should these organizations be doing. And it's not anything against the individuals running the organizations. They are corporate entities that have the responsibility to do certain corporate administrative things. You know, I gave you some background that the Boosters was formed in 1954, and the foundation was formed in 1987, and the Patrons Council
2010.
was formed in 2010 under the name Patrons Council. This is the first time tonight I've heard that they have a different name. And
Just for
You
the
know.
record, what does PTO stand for?
parent-teacher
Teachers?
organization,
All
as
right.
best that I could tell.
But are they a formal PTO? Are they registered as a PTO?
I believe they were going through that process, yes.
It's a good question, I don't know. And, you know, I don't have any of these bylaws that these organizations have. I think, Kevin, did you get bylaws from each of the
I did,
organizations?
I did.
Okay. So at some point, you can give those out to the board. You know, I brought this concern up to the interim superintendent back in June of 2009. I had some concern about some of the filings, specifically of the foundation. You know, that's when I found out that these organizations were going in to use our postage meter, and I asked, well, how does that work if they're these separate organizations? And from that point in time, I believe there's some kind of reimbursement for that, but, you know, I don't know how long that had been happening for years. And, you know, in the fall of 2010, I asked that policy 890 be placed on the agenda, and then it kind of falls off the agenda, so we asked for, you know, dates to track things on there. And in the area of, you know, administrative fiduciary responsibility and transparency, I put together a draft of policy 890 with the things I consider important. And, you know, I don't know if you want to take a straw poll. Is there anyone who couldn't vote for 90% of this?
Well, Mike,
Yes?
I read your whole packet, and there, on page 72, there's a footnote, number 3. It talks about Booster Club. It looks like an opinion. Booster clubs present potential liabilities, and they're seldom properly organized. They're generally not incorporated or otherwise legally recognized, et cetera, et cetera.
That's the IASB footnote.
IAS
Committee.
Yeah.
That's their note from the IASB attorneys.
Well, I guess, you know, I generally agree that this is smart housekeeping, really effective, and I wouldn't do it, personally, I wouldn't do it any other way. But with the privilege of using the RB name and the RB mascot, they are equivocating themselves with, or somehow joining themselves with the RB corporation of the school. And there's an implied connection with it, even though we're asserting that they shouldn't have any legal attachment to RB. So this is a hypothetical situation. If the organization XYZ, We Love Big Dogs, decided to raise $100,000, would we still implore that they abide by the same recommendations that you're making in here? These are quite extensive and they're time-consuming. I think they're very important for any organization to do it. But what kind of pressure would we have on an organization that just wishes to give you $100,000?
Well, I think an organization that you're describing is not covered under Policy 890. Because Policy 890 talks about organizations that use the school's name, use the school's team name, use the school's logo.
Yeah, if they chose not to, but they still chose to, like for instance, the boosters gave one gift to the $50,000 scoring sign for the swimming pool. And if an organization of the same people outside decided to do the same thing, they wouldn't really be bound by the same things. They would be like footnote number 3.
No, that footnote number 3 is addressing the fact that this is a common occurrence at school
Yeah, I
districts
know.
throughout Illinois.
Oh, yeah, I know.
It's the kind of things we're putting in here. The majority of these kinds of clubs wouldn't be able to meet what the basic is, and what they're saying at the end, I think the important point is the last one. If you're worried about protecting the district, and Kevin was going to have Tim check into that, you cover it in your Arizona mission insurance.
Well,
Because you could put this policy in and people could use your name and not follow it anyway, and you still have that liability.
oh, you still do.
Of course you do, if they
Well-
use your name.
Well, if they sign off on no culpability, they still have culpability, or they still have a liability to the organization. I guess I'm trying to separate them or bring them together.
I mean, we'd have to have a long talk with our attorney to answer that question.
Any other questions for Mike or?
Well, he asked a question, but I don't know if you're expecting an answer for everybody,
It's
whether people
probably
can sign
a
off
more of a
on 90%
rhetorical
of
question.
this.
Yeah, I believe in it,
I don't.
but
If
you
you'd
know.
like to me, I'll tell you why.
Let's hear it.
Okay,
I have a fundamental problem with how this is being drafted, because if you read any one of our other policies, the policies address issues at a high level that the board looks at from the balcony, and then they almost all say, and the administration will adopt procedures to address it. When we look at the calendar later on, we're going to have high things, we're going to look at the calendar. If you look at the IASB calendar, there's probably 40 reports and other compliance things that our administration is required to do every year. And we aren't even looking at that. We don't even look at this kind of detail for our own administration. We don't even tell them to put on the website. Now people have done a lot of good. I don't know what the problem is. We're trying to put things in, like they have to, organization has to have a policy against nepotism. I mean, I don't even know why that would care if there was nepotism. Maybe it's a whole family going to run it. You know, prohibition against political activities, the law addresses that. My problem is the law addresses how a 501c3 operates and how a nonprofit operates. And if they continuously file with the state and follow the law, we're doing a lot more looking at that than we are at our own administration and whether we're complying with rules that the board's responsible for. And then we have a whole list of things they should have to do with their website. And I don't understand why we want to direct people who are trying to do good for the school, we're directing certain things. Get 501c3, be a nonprofit, which you have to be to get 501c3, and comply with the rules. You know, some basic things like we had, you know, follow the school rules or whatever we had in there, but, you know, now we're this, not only are we managing outside organizations by doing this, we are putting requirements on it that far exceed what we put requirements on other rules that we have a duty to make sure our administration complies with. We say, have the administrators make sure it's done. And I don't see why we aren't taking the exact same approach with this policy that we have with the other 100 or so policies that we have.
Well, I can talk now.
Sure.
I think one of the reasons is that the superintendent, the last interim superintendent, didn't really address this issue. And that's why I think it's reasonable in this case that we have pretty detailed, policy, regarding this. And this isn't just typical of what I think the superintendent would be responsible for. This is more of our responsibility as a board interacting with the community. So I think it's a little different from your standard policy. So I think a little additional oversight here is not unreasonable. Now, I agree, starting from scratch and setting up the website and getting all this data on the website might be a little extra work, and I don't want to discourage anyone from contributing to RB. But once this stuff's up on the website, every year, whatever, shouldn't be that big a deal to just update it. And I really like the fact, June or whatever,
June meeting,
yeah, it's set up.
just make a presentation.
I think, these organizations do a lot of good, but some people have been wondering if there's, everything's transparent. And I think as representatives of the community, we owe it that the community knows that they're supporting these organizations, they're supporting the school. Everything is above board. And in terms of integrity and building support for our school, I think that's extremely important. So I think it's reasonable to have a little more oversight in this case on this policy than we normally would, and I'd support this.
Hey, Mike, maybe I missed this or misinterpreted it, but I think you all are right that it's an onerous burden on organizations of private citizens that don't get paid anything to do this, but they give of their time to do it. This puts an additional burden on it, but I think you suggested an umbrella organization that would absorb most of these responsibilities. There are three organizations, RBEA, the PTO, and the boosters now, but one organization would take care of all this paperwork that you're suggesting, right? So that the subgroups wouldn't have to, correct?
No, I'm thinking for a conversation for a long-term plan or another day would be some kind of overall fundraising umbrella
The fundraising
organization
umbrella.
in the school.
But they take care of the
One
paperwork.
organization instead of three. But in the meantime, we have this policy and we have these three organizations for right now. And moving towards, what do they really do? And having them put it on the website, I think what this policy in my draft doesn't do, it doesn't put any additional burden on the superintendent to collect records from
Oh,
them,
that's true.
and to have on file.
But somebody, that's what I'm saying,
Who's
it's an
going to go
onerous
through and check
burden.
and see if they have all this stuff on their website every year?
Well, that's something that can be checked. It's not something that he has to receive and file.
I'm just saying, though,
board
this is
does.
putting extra work on our administration to see if these people, they're going to have a checkoff and go check 3 websites every year and see if everything's there.
Yeah, I think we need to, as John said, I think we need to put a little bit more on the organizations to have them be above board as best as possible and be transparent as best as possible. Now, I included all my thoughts in here. Some of the questions, if you look at the filings, if you're a 501c3, answer these questions, and some of the filings don't even say that they're a 501c3, so you don't know if they have these type of things, such as the records retention and destruction, for example. But I think something more, oversight, I believe is appropriate in this case. because these are organizations out there using our name, and yes, they're doing good things for the school. They're raising money and giving money, but, you know, sometimes I'm out there and I'm wondering myself, you know, what do they do? Where are their meeting minutes? What do they have that they can show the public what they're doing? And that's what I'm expressing in this draft.
Can I ask
Any
one
other comments?
What about-
Gary,
Yeah.
hold on, Gary, do you have any comments?
Yeah, I'm trying to understand a couple things. I mean, we've only brought 3 organizations forward, and maybe my lack of the number of organizations out there. Are there other organizations that are using Riverside Brookfield, like a wrestling club, things like that? Are there others?
Riverside Brookfield High School is, I think, how it's written, if you're using Riverside Brookfield High School.
RB Otters.
But if you use Riverside Brookfield, I don't think that ties you to the high school by name. So yes, there's Riverside Brookfield Wrestling, Riverside Brookfield Swim Club, Riverside Brookfield.
And those are all
Soccer.
independent organizations.
You know, you can go to these various online, and all these filings that I gave you here today are from online. You can go to either the, you know, Secretary of State, the corporate LLC, good standing, and put in Riverside Brookfield, and you'll get quite a few out there. But only these 3, plus the expired, the one that was 1954, are the only 4 that show up with Riverside Brookfield High School. And since they're using Riverside Brookfield High School, I think we need to make sure everything is good and promote transparency, and this is what I drafted up.
Or do you have
Again,
comments?
so that because confusion's out there, so something like, and I'm not throwing, I'm just trying to understand this. Say RB Wrestling, they use our facility, or they don't use our facility?
They're-
So implied, there's association that it's high school sponsored? I mean, I'm just trying to understand, and what would this policy do for that? It doesn't, really, does it? It just addresses those and the 3 organizations that we have a tie that are using RB High School, right?
That's, yeah, I
But we
didn't,
can-
I didn't really change the first few paragraphs.
Yeah.
Organizations
So it
and
doesn't
boosters-
clean up any, I mean, I shouldn't say clean, because that would imply that something's bad there. I shouldn't have said it that way.
Yeah.
But that doesn't
That
do
doesn't, this doesn't
anything to
address
that. It's just because these 3 organizations are using the RB High School and want to be associated with the RB High School. Okay.
And this doesn't cover anything about any of the feeder programs, of which there's probably 5 or 6 out there.
Or do you have anything?
Yeah, I have a couple of comments. In most of our policies, we've accepted the recommendations of the state, but this one goes far and above. And if you look at other schools, this one also is more burdensome than what other schools have. And I guess the other comment would be, if our 3 organizations just said this was too oppressive for them and said, well, we just can't exist, that would be a great loss. But what I hear today, if the boosters just said, then fine, we won't be RB High School boosters, we'll just be Riverside Brookfield boosters, would they have to abide by this?
They would just, any donations to follow
Policy
880.
880.
And their
880.
Gifts to the school.
So then,
Use a different logo.
use a
Can't-
different
can't-
logo.
Can't use the high school name or logo. That's what this policy is about.
So then they could be Riverside Brookfield boosters, they could have their own little sports logo and just follow the gift. Same thing like the organization that does the telethon, they too could just be Riverside Brookfield.
They'd have to, imagine they'd have to refile their 501c3 or amend their 501c3 to their corrected name. But
But then they wouldn't have to do all these things, right?
I was thinking the same thing. Somebody did ask that. What if
That's
we
right.
just
Change the name.
changed the name and wanted to give gifts to the school? I said you'd have to follow 8080.
They could give gifts, but these are organizations that operate the telethon in the building. These
Sure.
are organizations that sell at the sports facilities,
But we-
at the sporting events.
So
But we
obviously,
have-
some of those things would change.
Yeah, but we have the music sponsors, we had the art club, we had the group of parents that support the musicals. We have several groups that support different populations in the school, and they're all doing their business in the school.
Yeah, but that's different.
How's that different? They're raising money and giving it to the school.
Because it's not part of the policy. Show me under the policy where that fits.
We didn't draft a policy that pulled out the RB Art Club. We didn't draft a policy that singled out the RB Music Club. But those exist. They raise the money and sell the food for all the plays.
I don't think there are separate 501c3s though.
So why do they get to raise money and donate it to the school? Why aren't we forcing them to do all these things?
I would think that's more just like a parents club to help the sponsor. I get what you're saying. I think we're mixing that one up a little bit.
So why are we forcing boosters then
Well,
go this route? Why can't they be a parents club of students in athletics and raise money? I mean, they have done nothing but give money and time to this school.
Yeah, we're trying to draw the distinction, what's the difference between the arts club boosters and the sports boosters?
Right.
Why are they bound to these kind of restrictions, the other ones aren't? That's your question, right?
Right, I mean, look at the swim parents, they do the same thing. Look at the water polo parents. We had an entourage of water polo parents, they do the same thing that the
Gangsters.
booster parents do.
this is going back to the last meeting where this is the one that was proposed, and this is the one I just modified and added some stuff, so it wasn't like I created the policy that identifies these organizations. It was already something in front of the board.
Well, it still raises a good question though, Mike. I think we benefited from that.
Okay, any other comments?
Can I say something?
Sure.
The one that goes to where I think is the extreme most onerous, and I'm struggling with why we'd ask for it, is on page, I don't know, the second page, third page of your proposed. And so everybody knows, I'm going to read it. The organization shall also maintain a letter on file with the superintendent. This letter shall be addressed to the superintendent and banks and any other financial institution signed by the organization president. It shall provide authorization for any financial institution holding funds or doing business with the organization to supply any and all documents to the superintendent upon his request. Now, I got to tell you, if I was not on the board and the president of the boosters and said, in order to keep doing a good thing that you've been doing for 40 years and donating all your money to the school, not only do I have to maintain a website the way it is, for some reason I have to let the superintendent in, have access to my bank accounts. I don't know if my members are going to like that very much. And the last thing I would suggest is the IASB, when they send out the press packages, they suggest that if you make changes to what they propose, you have your attorney look at it. And I think if we're going to come anything close to the significant changes we are putting on here, we should have our attorney look at it and see what kind of risks we're creating for ourselves by doing this.
I agree.
Okay. Any other comments?
Well, I mean, I think, could you address Tim's concern on that bank thing, Mike? Or what's the purpose of that?
Well, the purpose is not to disclose your bank account to the public per se, but to have it on file in case something happened, that they're using the school's name, and if there would be some reason of and I don't even want to say someone stealing money or something, that the superintendent would need to get involved, we give him something that he can help get involved and settle any controversy that might arise on an organization using our name. That's kind of how I
And that's why I
Had
was
that.
suggesting going to attorney. I hope that he would suggest that's a pretty bad idea.
Well,
You're gonna get into
I'm not
the
an
issues with
attorney,
that.
so, that's why my comment originally was, could people vote for 90% of this? I mean, is this something that is so off the wall that the board couldn't accept any of the changes I proposed as opposed to what we voted down last time. And I know the policy committee is going to meet before the next meeting, and I'm not saying they need to bring this specifically back, but
Well, I think let's do this before they go to the policy committee that comes back to it. Let's have the attorney look at it, see if there's any issues that would cause any legal hassles for us, and then I think it's the board's supposition. What they want to do is, based on the feedback from the attorney of his review, then we can look at if we're going to approve the whole thing, or if there's any issues, and then we can identify sections that we don't want, we can vote them out, or vote them in, whatever. So what's the feeling of the board on that? Is that all right?
Well, I don't think we can do that in one meeting, but what I would like the policy group maybe to do, to remind us what that procedure is. My recollection would be that if we make any kind of changes, there's a first read, and then it has to mull a month for any kind of public comments. Maybe we could have kind of a re-articulation of what that process is.
Well, I think that's the same question Mike asked.
Yeah.
The first read is when you put out the first time, as it keeps changing.
Then,
Otherwise, if somebody wanted to make a minor change on the day we're going to approve it, which
True.
we've done, we'd have to do another first read every time. So they went out there for first read, it's been out there for a while, it's on second read, we're still working on it, but
when
in
was
my
the,
mind, it's already second read, it's whatever we come up with.
but this is such a major change, I wouldn't consider
Well, we
this.
recommend to have a third read or whatever, but I think we can't start, every time there's a change, say it's another first read. Because otherwise, any minor change a board member would suggest, we have to go 2 more reads on it.
Right, but this is, well, I guess maybe there's some clarification. What Mike has proposed is such a major revamp of this.
I understand?
Why don't we,
and I'd just like to, I have one more item that I'd like to just read. Metra puts out a little flyer, and it's entitled "Making Metra Even More Transparent." And it's from Alex Clifford, the Metra CEO. One of my goals when I came to Metra was to make the agency as open and transparent as possible. We recently took another step towards doing this by deciding to post all documents relating to meetings of the Board of Directors online and in advance of the monthly meetings. Board agendas minutes have been posted for several years on Metra's website. Now, for the first time, all supporting documents related to agenda items are available in advance on the website. The documents include regular monthly reports on Metra's on-time performance, ridership performance, finances, and website activity. They also include supporting documents for monthly consent agenda items covering proposed contracts for professional service, real estate, and other matters. Documents relating to other one-time agenda items will also be available. And these are some of the exact same things that we're doing here at this school. We're posting our agenda, we're posting our documents prior to our meeting. And that's what I'd like to see trickle down to these other organizations.
But there's a significant difference in a government agency at putting documents out that, we don't put all the things that Metra has up there on our thing. We're a government agency. These are nonprofit volunteer groups.
I understand that, but they are corporations, they're not individual people.
Could I throw an idea out there, and I would be comfortable if we would pass this by the attorney, but what about asking those organizations, since we are allowing them to use the RV High School and the logo, if we can have a designee on their board?
Well, you have school representatives, right?
Well, the policy calls for some kind of person to be,
The liaison?
But actual, so that way, where this thing about having the superintendent access to the bank account, whatever, if there's a board designee on the board of the organization.
a board member?
No, or a designee. I don't know.
Gary will.
I'm
I
just
think
pondering.
yeah, I think if they start posting everything and putting everything out there, they're disclosing all their things. I think that's what the community is looking for. That's what I'm looking for.
Okay, so we're going to have the attorney look at this, what Mike has presented.
I wrote a couple notes. I think we'll have the attorney check between review Mike's draft as well as maybe the draft that was submitted at the last meeting to see if there's good and bad from both, and see if they recommend another version that I would recommend. From their recommendation, I'll call the policy council based on when I hear back from the attorney, and we can draft something up with the next press packet. Remember, we only have one meeting in June, one meeting in July. I mean, so this is going to take some time. So until then, the current policy is in place.
I have one comment. PTO is a national organization, and it came up in patrons about 8 years ago. You can't change your name to PTO. You have to register and be part of, and if they're a national organization, they have to follow the national organization rules. I don't know, we may have to check with the attorney. They may not have to follow these rules, they have to follow like this national organization kind of rules. So
True.
we probably need to look into that.
Good point.
Okay.
No, they'd have to follow these too.
Well, I'm not
Change
sure,
it.
because the PTO is a national
That's a
organization
policy.
and it follows its own, it's got
I
bylaws
think-
regulatory that are
Laura,
national.
Laura, I think above and beyond, to use the school's name and logo, if the Board of Education approved the policy to use their logo or name, they would still have to amend some of ours as well.
Okay, so that would probably be one more thing we'd want to ask attorneys, because that's a little tricky there too.
All right, anything else?